Well, I am delighted to welcome my guest today, Kim Botto. For decades, Kim has led children's and student ministries at her local church, while also leading initiatives around adoption and foster care. Kim's an adoptive mum, and she is mum and grandma to neurodivergent kids. And she's passionate about creating spaces where all kids, regardless of their background, behaviour, or ability, are able to belong, contribute, and grow. So, Kim, I am super excited to talk to you today and explore all of those things. Welcome to Hope Cake.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for inviting me.
Shall we start at the beginning? What first led you into advocating for neurodivergent children and inclusion in the church space?
Well, it started with wanting to advocate for particular kids that had a hard time fitting in. That was before neurodivergence was even a term. I mean, I noticed, like when I was in high school, I served in kids ministry, and I noticed that there were kids that were, on the outside of the circle or getting tons of correction. And so I was drawn to them. And then as I continued to work with kids and then actually went on staff at a church, that's when there really came terms for it. Like, oh, okay, what we're using is trauma-informed strategies. And I will say that my journey into trauma-informed started with, we adopted our two youngest daughters, one at the age of 10 and one at the age of 15. And we thought, oh, we've got three bio kids. We're great. We got this. And we realized that we didn't. Because of their background, we needed to use different strategies. They didn't feel safe in our home. They didn't feel safe with us. So that started the trauma-informed strategy, which then, trauma-informed strategies are based on relationship and connection, that's the way to do all of our relationships, including kids whose brains are wired differently. So that's kind of how it started.
So you've called your book, which is rather brilliant. I have listened to it. I've listened to the audiobook. I can highly recommend it. So it's called Boundless Hope for Every Child.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I love the word hope. Obviously, I'm very keen on the word hope.
Obviously, yes. Hope.
But that kind of implies that there's the possibility of hopelessness. And I wonder then what can make neurodivergent kids and their families feel hopeless, do you think?
Gosh. Well, first of all, I want to say the title, as far as Boundless Hope, is talking to us who work with kids, because often what happens is we lose hope. And when, Joe, if you have a kid that you have no hope for, if you think they're too far gone, you're going to approach them differently than if you think, oh, this is a kid that is created in the image of God and has amazing gifts to contribute. So that's where the title came from. It's to help us who interact with kids see kids through the lens of they're created in the image of God, and we can have boundless hope for them, which means, infinite hope. As far as kids and parents losing hope, it's hard. Kids who are neurodivergent are operating in a world that was not built for them. It's often overstimulating. People are communicating in ways that they don't understand. They pick up on social cues differently than we do. So that's hard. And then for parents, when they continually have to advocate, that's exhausting. Like to have to tell people over and over again, explain who their kid is. So what happens is then the parent begins feeling really isolated and alone. The antidote for that is if the church could be a place where every child truly could belong, where they could find their peers, where they could grow in their faith and ask those hard questions in a safe environment, I think that can then fuel the hope of families. And I was actually volunteering at an event last night for teens and adults who are disabled. And I was talking to a high school girl, and she said that she felt the loneliest at church
Mm.
and it broke
Oh, wow.
my heart. And she said, I'm not like the other kids. You know, kids my age don't want to be around people who are different. I walk in and I don't have anybody to talk to. So consequently, what she does is she often goes to church with her parents, you know, sits in service and doesn't participate in the student
Hmm.
activity. So that's just a fresh, you can see then she's
Yeah.
losing hope of having friends. And
Mm.
so,
Yeah. I wonder then what things you think get in the way of churches showing up well for kids and making them feel like they belong. Like, that's really awful if girls are turning up and going, I haven't got any friends. There's no point me going and joining in with the stuff that's there for me.
you know, we often surround ourselves that are people like us. So when someone is different, it feels uncomfortable. And we live in a world where comfort is a super high value. So if we feel uncomfortable, then we start backing up and we don't engage. And so I think that makes it very hard then for churches to create these spaces for kids. Eric Carter, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Dr. Eric
Yeah.
Carter from Baylor University. So he recently, I don't know if it's published yet, but I was at a conference where he actually spoke about it. And where they interviewed senior leaders in the church as far as their interest in disability ministry. And what they found was that for the most part, leaders were curious, they were interested. However, they worried about, do we have the resources to do this well? If we start having people with disabilities in our church, are we going to mess it up? Are we going to hurt them?
Mm.
And it was lack of resources and how they prioritize things. It just wasn't a priority. And so to me, I think, you know, if we look at the Great Commission doesn't say, you know, that it's about teaching and discipling typical people. It just says
Right.
all nations, which is
Yeah.
all people. So if that's the case, I think we as church leaders just need to, if we're feeling uncomfortable or not sure what to do, take a deep breath and have a conversation. If we're talking about kids and students, have a conversation with their parents. You know, ask them, what would be helpful? What would make your kid feel safe? I did a post recently where I asked parents, what would you like to hear? Because I work with a lot of parents of kids who have differences. And what they hear a lot of times from church leaders is, we're not equipped.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we don't have kids like your kids here. And I think it's okay. Like, churches should be honest, and it's okay to say we're not equipped. So I threw it out to the parents, and what they said is, it just can't be the end of the conversation. Like, you
Yeah.
can say, oh wow, gosh, I love Tommy. I love his interest in Matchbox cars. And you know what? We've never had anybody like Tommy here. Can you help me create a place where Tommy feels safe, where he can hear about Jesus in a language he understands? So I think for the churches, it's having a conversation, stepping toward that individual rather than in fear, which I think that's a lot of times what it is. We step back, but just say, what could it be? And then have a partnership with parents. Parents they love talking about their kid. They would love to give you input. Now, they might not always have the answers. Because I've talked to leaders too. I'll say, well, I asked the parent doesn't know. And I had a mom, I thought this was brilliant. She said, if there was an easy solution, we would have already done it. Complex issues have complex solutions, and it's going to take time. So it's making that commitment to walk alongside the parent and be curious and be flexible. And I have found that often with just minor modifications, we can be a place for every kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's a lot of leaders out there, though, who may well be listening to this and thinking, that's great. I really want to be inclusive, but I'm actually a little bit overwhelmed by the whole concept of it. Has there been a time for you where you felt out of your depth with a kid who shows up differently?
Sure. I mean, I talk about it in the book. So as a little boy, and he showed up, and we had what I thought was a super fun environment, and Gino was not having it. I mean, and I didn't know what to do, and the leaders were frustrated, and he was, verbally expressing his displeasure. He was attempting to get out of the room, and I mean, we were to the point where like, I don't know that we can accommodate this child. And then I noticed, I'm like, oh, he keeps trying to leave the room. What if I actually let him leave the room safely?
Right.
And I go with him. And I know some people say, I don't have enough volunteers for that. That is an issue. I mean, we had enough people where I could leave the room with him, go into public spaces, where I'm not alone with the child. We even walked outside, and I had people from the security team. I go, hey, watch me, so I'm not alone with him. Turns out years later, he was diagnosed with autism. And so this environment was just overstimulating for him. And Joe, for months, we're like, we don't know what to do with this child. And all it took was for me to just stop and go, oh, wait, he keeps trying to leave. Why don't I just let him leave? And when I did, he got more regulated. He was more calm. We could then come back into the room for certain areas or for certain times of the service. We identified times that, oh, this is too much for him. Like transitions were really hard. So we just went down the hall during transitions. So, I mean, that was really one of my first, he was one of my first kids where I'm like, oh, it's not about changing this kid. It's about us looking at things that we can change to make the environment easier.
I'm interested that you said later he was diagnosed with autism, though, because I think a lot of times it takes a while for neurodivergency to be recognized, doesn't it? And actually diagnosed. Like my son, who is now nearly 19, has ADHD, and he wasn't diagnosed until he was 16. And so all the time that he was in church as a child, we didn't know. We didn't know as his parents. And he's my first child. He is
Right.
just him. Like I'm just like, well, this is how he is.
Right.
And so perhaps we would have been those parents if people had said, what can we do to help? We'd be like, I don't know. He just is. So is that part of the problem, that things don't get diagnosed and perhaps parents themselves don't recognize that there's anything particularly different about their kid?
I think it is part of the problem because so often we think we need a diagnosis in order to engage with a child differently. And we don't. Every kid has a story. Every kid has unique needs, regardless of what their diagnosis is. And I think we get too hung up on what's the diagnosis. And I was actually on my podcast, I was talking to a therapist with a whole bunch of degrees. And she said, because I said, what do you do with somebody who says, you need a diagnosis, you need the story? She goes, you don't need the whole story to be kind and compassionate to a child. And Dr. Ross Green, who he wrote The Explosive Child and Lost at School, he works with a lot of kids with big behaviors. And he said, children do well when they can. So, Joe, if that's the case, if we have a kid like your son in church who maybe moves a lot, and maybe we can't give him 5-step instructions because his brain is so active, like he can't remember all those steps. So if that happens, we don't need a diagnosis of ADHD. If we're looking at him, like Ross Green says, and goes, he's not doing what I want him to do, or his behavior isn't meeting expectations. Oh, he must need my help. And so I just stopped and I'm like, oh, you know what? It never works when I give him more than 3 steps at a time to do. I'm going to start giving him instructions in just 2 steps. I mean, you do not need an ADHD diagnosis to do that.
No, but that's a great attitude, but I don't know we always get or we always see. That kind of, oh, he's not doing what I'd like him to do. How can I change? We don't do that, do we? We go, how do I get this kid to change? I wonder if part of the issue for kids ministry leaders is that they worry about focusing too much on individuals and therefore feeling like the rest of the group are missing out in some way. Because often we're there with a whole bunch of kids, and if you've got to give your attention to one child in particular.
Right. Yes, I think we do hear that, and it's often phrased as this child is a distraction.
Mm.
And what I have found, a lot of times the adults are the ones who are most distracted. I mean,
Yeah.
kids are used to operating with a lot going on around them. We're called to disciple all children. And just because a kid is a little louder, or maybe they need more flexible seating, that's not a reason. And we are modeling to the other kids in the room what it looks like to interact with a child who's different, what it looks like to interact with a child who's having a meltdown. And when they see us being kind and compassionate, that actually makes the environment feel safer for them too. Because you might have a typical kid. A true story. We had a kid who on the way out the door noticed his goldfish was dead on the counter. He'd flipped out of the, bowl.
No.
So he came in and he was very upset. And it took us a long time to figure out why he was kicking chairs. But that kid, if he has seen us interact and engage with and care for other children who are having a meltdown, he knows that this is a safe place to come in and be who he is. And we are going to meet him where he is. So we're modeling to the other kids how we interact with kids who are different or kids who are having a hard time. So I think it's good for them to see other kids, because the other side of that would be if every time a kid has a meltdown or every time a kid comes in who maybe needs different accommodations, if we send them away, the message we're telling them is don't engage with kids who are different. We don't
right.
engage with them. And they are going to grow up to be people who think we don't engage with people who are different. So as the adults, we need to model this is a place for everybody. And I'll give you an example. There's a school system nearby. They have 3 elementary schools that all feed into a middle school. And one of the elementary schools has the kids who need extra support. Middle school teachers have told me when those kids all come into middle school, it is obvious to them which of the middle school kids went to school with kids who are different. They are friends with them. They invite, hey, come over here and play Uno with me. Even though maybe the child, because of the way their body is, they can't hold Uno cards. So they make accommodations for the kid. The other kids, they're awkward and they're backing away. And some of them are even bullying because, bullies a lot of time when they feel uncomfortable and sometimes bullying is their response. So I think when I heard that, I thought, if that isn't incentive to get our kids with kids who aren't like them.
Yeah. I love that. My next question was going to be about that, about how we encourage good relationships that include everyone, because sometimes kids deliberately exclude children who are different. So I love that we can model that ourselves. I wonder if there's a step further that we can go to in our kids groups as well.
Well, I'll say, Joe, sometimes we as adults exclude other adults who are different.
We do, I know. It's just a human thing, isn't it?
So I think the most important thing for us to do is to model to the kids what it looks like to engage with, play with, be a friend to somebody who's different. There are great children's books that you can use. I have on my blog, I have a whole list. I have an article with a whole bunch of children's books. There's All My Stripes. It's a book about autism, a zebra with autism that talks about what it's like to be autistic. There are also books, How Full Is My Bucket for Kids, that talks about including others. And basically it's saying, our words and our actions can build somebody up or tear somebody down. So what are we going to do with our words and actions? Those things that can help. And as we model, narrate what we're doing, don't just do it, but actually narrate. We're going to do this activity a little bit differently for Joe. Here, Joe, why don't we try this? And kids know, oh, it's okay to do things differently. But we as the adults can really set it. And you're going to have some great kids in your ministry. I have a granddaughter who's just a natural nurturer and includer. Have them help other kids do it. And I think we have to be careful when we do that, because sometimes then I have a tendency, I want to call it out. But then it seems like it's something unusual.
Yeah,
and we want
true.
that to be the norm, but be aware of it and then try to get other kids in that child's orbit so they can see how that child is interacting with kids who are different.
Yeah. Because it's not just about belonging, is it? It's about helping kids who show up differently to really engage and really learn and, and grow and flourish in that environment. How do we do that?
What you're saying is absolutely right. And I had a mom who has a child he actually had a traumatic brain injury. And so now he operates differently. And she said, oh, people are nice to him, but they're not his friend.
Right.
There's a difference. And again, I think setting it up in our rooms that it's okay for Johnny to sit in the back during large group. Joe, I don't know how your son was, but a lot of kids with ADHD, when we expect them to sit inches from their peers on the floor for an extended period, it's really hard for them and often doesn't end up well. So helping kids understand, oh, actually, Johnny sits in a chair in the back with a fidget. That is how he best learns. So again, it just goes back to modeling. And I've seen in schools, I haven't seen it done much in churches, but where a parent will come in and talk about, of course, you got to do it with the kids' permission, make sure you're doing it in an honoring way, but talk about the differences and how their brain operates differently. And I saw a video the other day of an elementary school autistic little girl, precious little girl, and she stood up and she talked about how certain noises actually hurt her body, noises that other kids in the room like. Or she talked about, I can't tell if you're mad or bored with me by looking at your face. I don't see that. She talked about, there's some things I really like and I'll talk about them a lot. So I want you to be interested in the stuff I'm interested in, but it's also okay to say, hey, hey, Joe, can we talk about something different?
Yeah, it's just understanding, isn't it? It's learning to understand. Let's talk about parenting neurodivergent kids, because you've got some experience of that, I know. What do you wish more churches understood about the experiences of parents who are raising neurodivergent children?
They love their children. They want us to see the amazing gifts that their kid has. Just us pointing out, oh man, Johnny really made me laugh today when we were doing this together. Or I loved how Johnny was so creative when we were doing this activity. Point out the good. We had at our church, in our kids ministry, one of our expectations was for every single child that left, we called them by name. And then we also told the parent one positive thing about them, every single kid. And what that does is that gets our leaders in the habit of looking for something.
Yeah, because they're thinking, I've got to tell mom something when she comes to get him.
Exactly. Because so often we get so focused on what we call, I'll put it in air quotes, negative behavior, that we fail to look at the amazing qualities of each kid. And I will also say, for parents of kids who have differences or kids who have big behaviors, if they're having big behaviors in our environment, 99.99% chance they're having that in other environments too. So when that parent comes to our room and they're greeted with a laundry list of infractions from the day, and then people say, oh my gosh, and they got so upset and they stormed off. Well, they just might be tired of hearing about what people perceive as wrong with their child. And there are things that we need to talk to about the parent, but I think understanding that, I mean, Joe, I don't know with your child if you got a lot of reports on he moves a lot or he talks a
I
lot.
mean, honestly, Kim, honestly, yeah, I mean, just from every direction, really. And bear in mind, we did not know he had ADHD. It hadn't been flagged to us at all. We just got phone calls from the school every day about his behaviour, the walk of shame across the playground when the teacher calls you over because they need to tell you something that he's done again. The sort of raised eyebrows in church when another mum would go, oh yeah, well, yeah, of course it's him doing that, because it would be always. And yeah, and actually his Cub Scout leader was amazing and did brilliant and thought he was amazing. And when she said to me, oh, he's been so good, he's done this, this and this, I remember saying, and he was about 8 or 9 years old then, I remember saying to her, well, you're the first adult who's actually told me that, who's actually seen who he is. Because in every other environment, including church, he was seen as a disruption and
Yeah.
a bit of a pain, actually, some of the time. But actually, he's really delightful. He really is delightful.
Right. Yeah. So that's an example then, Joe. That's why we need to be calling out the good and not just giving a laundry list.
Mm.
Because how do they make you feel in those environments?
Just awful, because you can't do anything about it. Like, it just is who they are, and you have to advocate so hard for your child. You have to, and I felt, especially with schools, that I had to be the perfect model parent just so they knew that it wasn't me. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? It was that kind of, I
Yeah,
don't
I
want you to
do.
think that this is because of the way we're bringing him up. I want you to see that this is his personality trait and this is who he is, and work with that instead. But yeah, you're fighting on different levels.
Yeah, and there's so many things we can do. I mean, for one, let go of some of the expectations that we have that
Mm,
kids need to sit still in order to listen.
yeah,
Actually, for
right,
some kids, and probably for your son, he could listen better if he could move his body a little bit.
right,
So let him
yeah.
stand in the back and move his body. I think we get um I posted something and people, it was so funny. Sitting still is not a spiritual discipline. And people
Yes,
are
I
like,
saw that. I
yes,
love
yes,
that.
yes. And so many parents were saying yes. And then they also talked about reverence is being quiet. And actually, you can be very reverent, loving the Lord and worshiping and being the opposite of quiet. So it's just looking at the individual kid. But as far as parents, call out the good. And if you do have some, I mean, yeah, sometimes we do need to tell the parents something. Pick one thing. Don't tell them 10 things. I don't know about you, Joe, but when my kids were little, they used to laugh about if I would get upset about something, I would say, and you didn't pick your backpack up off the floor and you took food up to your room and you got dirty clothes under your bed and all of a sudden, well, for one, you just can't take in all that information. But we as an adult, we need to prioritize. What is the one thing we need to talk to the parent about? And what we would, the steps we would go through, first of all, identify something positive you're going to say about the kid. Oh, first pray before you, and you can pray in the room with your eyes open. Pray before you have this conversation with the parents. Call out something good. Identify the one thing you want to talk to them about and enter into it as a partnership. Hey, I just wanted to make you aware of this. And is there anything that that helps with that? And then end with, like if they have a kid named Joe, you go, oh, and I can't wait to have Joe back next week. And I think we're going to try this. And then the last step is within 24 to 48 hours, reach out to that parent via text, phone call, whatever, and just say, love talking to you. And I can't wait to have Joe back. And we know that Joe loves Matchbox cars. I just went to the grocery store and I bought 3 Matchbox cars. We're going to have them waiting for Joe. Because what happens to parents, I mean, Joe, you just said, you heard it over and over with your kid. No matter how many times they tell you you want that kid to come back, they start thinking, they don't want my kid. My kid's a problem. My kid's a burden. So we want to call them back and remind them, we love your kid and can't wait to have them back with us.
So how do we make church feel like it's a safe and inclusive and welcoming space for a child when perhaps there's been past hurt or misunderstanding in that family? So, a family have come to your church from a different church because they weren't really welcome there. They're going to be a little bit on edge, aren't they? They're going to be a little bit,
Sure.
Is the same thing going to happen here?
Yeah. I think conversation. Have a conversation with them. Find out what their past experiences have been. Continue to reiterate, we want this to be a place for your kid to grow in their faith, to have fun with their friends, to be cared for by safe adults. I mean, it starts with that conversation. And then, there's some certain things that we can do in our environments that will benefit all kids and help it feel safer. And one, it might seem silly, but visual schedules. Just having a visual schedule in your room, because for a kid whose brain is just thinking all the time, or for maybe a kid who's experienced trauma that has had, surprises that weren't good, for them to be able to look at any point and look at the schedule. And for kids who don't read, then you put icons on there so they can say, oh, we just went to large group, and oh, now I'm going to go have a snack, and then I'm going to do this. Visual schedules is a way. Having a quiet space in the room. You don't need a separate sensory room to be a safe place for every kid. Have a space in the back of your room. You can get little portable tents on Amazon for $60. Or if you don't have that, go to a big appliance store and get an appliance box. Put it in the back of your room. Put a couple pillows. Put some Play-Doh, pipe cleaners. Noise canceling headphones are always a great thing to have. Those.
They're really good, aren't they? We have those.
Yeah, they are
in our church, and
yep.
It's the room that we're in is quite an old building, and it's a really echoey room. The acoustics are terrible.
Right.
But those noise cancelling headphones are really helpful for kids who aren't neurodiverse as well. Like some of them just it's just a bit loud, and they'll stick some on. So,
well, that's another thing. So often there'll be kids with no label on them, but do benefit from having a quiet space to just go back. So these things that we're doing for maybe a kid who's neurodivergent can actually help all kids. But I think having a quiet space, identify it, so the kid knows, oh, I can just go back here. I a couple years ago, I was in one of my grandson's classroom, and she had a little tent in the back, and she had some different manipulatives and just quiet activities they could do. And the kid didn't have to say anything. The kids knew, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I just need a break, and Joe, we all need a break sometimes. They knew they could just go back and sit in that tent. And the expectation was, you couldn't be in there forever. You couldn't, you need to be quiet when you were there. Kids knew how to use it. But I think that's a great way for churches to just be a safer place for everybody. And then, your adult volunteers might need to go sit in the tent sometimes too.
Yeah, as long as they don't all go at once. Yeah, and I love you talk in the book about how adaptations that we can make for people with particular needs can actually end up benefiting lots of people. and I guess that applies to the adult group as well as the kids groups. I wonder if you can think of like kind of 3 easy practical steps that we can take that would help neurodivergent people with a sense of belonging and inclusion, and this is a place for me, that could also benefit other people.
Yeah. And you know what? You're probably gonna think I'm gonna go to tangible, concrete things. I can go there, but first I want to go to, it's our mindset. It's what we believe about these kids. So I think the first thing is we want to be curious. When a kid isn't meeting expectations, don't just jump to assumptions that, like Joe, like you said, you're trying to be the perfect parent. Don't jump to the assumption that, oh, he needs better parenting. Instead, be curious about what might I do to help this kid. Another thing is be flexible. I wish we would just strike the phrase, well, that's the way we've always done it. Because the way we've always done it does not have to be the way it's always done. And a child might need a different seating option. They might need flexibility in how they do an activity. So be curious, be flexible, and I would say assume the best of the kid and the parent. Because leaders will talk about, oh, the parent didn't even tell me. What? Well, assume the best. Assume that maybe they don't know, or maybe they're afraid that if they tell you, that you won't let their kid come in. So those are mindset shifts that do so much to create an environment where people feel welcome. I mean, Joe, think about you with your son. If people would just do those things, assume the best, be curious, and then we're flexible with him, would that have made you and your son feel more included?
Yeah, that it would have made a world of difference. A world of difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some mindset shifts. And then tangible, I already talked about the having a quiet space, having fidgets in the room. And don't get the spinners that make lights and noise, get fidgets that will work in your environment, and communicate, because people say, oh, but if one kid has a fidget, all of them want it. Well, not necessarily. But fidgets aren't that expensive. Have a bucket of them. Have clear expectations on how they're used. You keep them in your hands. And if you don't meet the expectations for using them, then you put them back. So that's another thing. And the visual schedules. Also, I'd say on flexibility, there was a child who he was not yet diagnosed, but he ended up a couple years later being diagnosed with ADHD. And there was a certain way that they wanted the craft to be done that you would take home then to your parents. And I watched the leader keep trying to tell this kid to do it exactly as instructed. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's the goal? The goal is to reinforce the story, and maybe putting David standing on his head with the sheep instead of standing up, maybe that's going to be more memorable for the kid. And who knows, maybe David did stand on his head, get a little energy going, blood flowing in a different way. So I think let's not be so rigid in places that really don't make a difference. And this kid was super creative. I know this kid now, and, a middle school student. Of course he would put David on his head and not standing on his feet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really key point, actually. What is the goal? I think that's the question that we should ask ourselves. We should kind of, before we speak, before we say something, we think, what is the goal? Why am I responding in this way?
Oh, so often. That's, people will laugh at me because we'll be talking about something like, oh, you're going to ask what's the goal? Because, I'll have leaders who will say, I can't get this kid to sit in a chair for small group. I'm like, well, what's the goal? Is the goal for them to do small groups sitting down? Like, is there anything wrong with them just standing by the table when you do small group? They'll say, I can't get the fifth grade boys to do the hand motions when we do the songs. I'm like, well, what's the goal? Is the goal for them to do the hand motions, or is the goal for them to learn how to worship? And maybe, you start moving into those 5th, 6th grade years, they start feeling self-conscious and they feel awkward and they can't keep up with emotions. And so they just don't do it. So let's be flexible and give them other opportunities to worship. Maybe they'd actually do better, not as a leader. Like, how do you worship? Is it always doing hand motions? Of course not. Joe, you probably worship through Bible reading, through journaling, so set up some different stations around the room so kids can do that. But yeah, I agree, Joe. Figure out what the goal is, because if we don't know what we're trying to do, then we'll get stuck on things that really don't make any difference.
Yeah. And I've had parents say to me, I can't get my kid to sit still and pray properly.
Yeah.
And
What does that
I've
mean?
been kind of, and what does praying properly look like then?
Right.
And it's close your eyes, put your hands together, sit very still.
Right.
But again, what's the goal? Is the goal that they talk to God? Great.
Yeah.
Stand on your
Well,
head, jump up and down while you talk to God. He doesn't
right.
mind.
And Joe, I don't know about you, but some of my best prayer times with the Lord, man, I'm moving, I'm talking loud, and my eyes are wide open.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a cultural shift as well, isn't there? And perhaps undoing what we have been taught as children ourselves, maybe.
Right.
We all come with baggage, don't we? And we're all work in progress.
That's right. We are. Well, you know what? And that's an important thing to remember about the kids too. They are a work in progress. That's biblical. God is doing a good work in them, and it's up to us. We can help them discover their gifts. We can help them discover the unique ways that they've wired. So your child, rather than constantly, the story we're telling him is, you move too much, you talk too much, you're disruptive, you're a burden. What if instead the story is, oh my gosh, you come up with the best ideas.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love how you come in with so much energy. That would totally reframe the way that kid thinks about themselves.
Yeah, it's true. So if you could say one thing to every children's ministry leader who feels underqualified and unsure about inclusion, I wonder what it would be.
It's worth it. It's what we're called to do. We will grow in the process. Don't do it alone. There's a whole bunch of people out there doing really great stuff. Follow some of them on social media, like Abby at the Accessible Gospel, or Lexi at the Adapted Way, or Lara at Raising Autistic Disciples. Follow them, because I think you'll be encouraged about the stories, but also encouraged about, a lot of times it's not that hard. It's just simple modifications. And for a lot of kids who are different, and I work with a lot of kids who have experienced trauma too. Psalm 139:14, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. We know that part. But then the end of that is, and my soul knows it very well. And for a lot of kids who are not typical, their soul does not know that they are amazing and awesome humans created in the image of God. We can help them understand that through our words and actions. To me, that's very motivating. We want kids to know who God created them to be and that they are a treasure. I mean, that's biblical. They are a treasure. And for some, there's a little dusting off we need to do to discover the treasure. Sometimes it's hidden by some behaviors. But if we believe the Bible is true, there are treasures in each one of us, and we need to call them out. And I mean, your life will be forever changed.
Amazing. Thank you. You also put out amazing things on Instagram. So let everybody know how they can find you, Kim.
Oh, Instagram. It's just Kim Botto, KIMBOTTO.
Easy peasy. Yeah, definitely give Kim a follow if you don't already, because she's got some really encouraging posts and things on there. And how do people get hold of your book? It is available in the UK, because I've listened to it on Audible.
Yeah. It's available on Amazon in paperback, Audible, and ebook. And then I also, for United States residents, you can get bulk discounts by ordering from kimbotto.com.
Okay, brilliant. So Boundless Hope for Every Child is out there doing its thing, and it's really great. It's really worth a listen or a read. I thoroughly recommend it. Thank you so much for your time today, Kim. I've really enjoyed our chat.
Great chatting with you.